Hi, I'm Cassie Fawcett, and I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Portzelt here today to talk about Lyme disease for the part of the empathy aspect of our project.
Good morning. My name is Charles Portzelt, and I'm here to help you in any way I can.
All right. So, Mr. Portzelt, how has being diagnosed with Lyme disease created an impact on your life?
Well, I mean, it's physically, there's a lot of ramifications of Lyme disease. It really changes your life because I have almost aged a whole lot overnight practically, and it's just, it can be very limiting if the symptoms persist, which they have in my case, and I've had 3 cases of it, so 3 doses of Lyme disease.
Okay. What kind of symptoms did you have to face?
Well, I mean, the symptoms mimic a lot of other things, which is a big problem. With the Lyme disease, some people get the bullseye rash. I've had Lyme disease 3 times. I've never had the bullseye rash. So I live on 7 acres of woods in Monroe. So I am in the woods and the grass, the leaves all the time. I take off ticks quite frequently. I mean, a lot of the ticks are the dog ticks, which are bigger ticks and don't carry the Lyme disease. It's a much smaller deer tick that carries the Lyme. So I am a firefighter in Bridgeport, and we have an annual physical, which we skip sometimes, but my Lyme disease was diagnosed by going through the physical for work. It was picked up in an EKG because I had Lyme disease for quite a while, undetected, undiagnosed. And they call it cardiac Lyme. It went to my heart, it went into my brain. And so basically that is how I found out, by going through the physical and it being picked up in the cardiac EKG, which is not the usual way that Lyme disease is diagnosed.
How did it affect your everyday life?
I mean, the symptoms, like I said, symptoms mimic a lot of other things. I forget when I had my first case. I was about 60 years old. So I've had, aches and pains, things like that, which I just always attributed to getting older. And being a firefighter, it's a very active and physical job, so there's a lot of aches and pains go along with that. Changing my life, it also affected my brain, which I had a very large short-term memory loss. And all those things, I just figured was getting older. And when it was finally diagnosed as being Lyme disease, there's a lot of things you go through, both things you can do to sort of mitigate it, maybe avoid it, changes in lifestyle. As I say, I live in the woods. I am a very outdoors active person. And it's a question of whether you want to change your lifestyle totally and become an indoor person. I couldn't do that. So you try there's things you can do around the house. I mean, keeping leaves away from the house, keeping out of the woods, which I couldn't do. But those are some of the things you can do. And use of chemicals on the way you dress, the things you can do with your clothing, tucking your pants into your socks, wearing long sleeves all the time, summer, winter, whatever, when you're outside. It gets a little bit difficult sometimes. And then you use the chemicals, the sprays, things like that on your clothing and on your body, which sometimes is the cure worse than the disease, or are you putting the chemicals on your body and maybe opening yourself up to other things later on? But
All right, so where do you think you were when you contracted the tick?
no,
In your backyard?
more than likely, I said, it's on my own property, yes.
All 3 times? All right. And what kind of clothes were you wearing that day?
I mean, without thinking about it back then, wearing shorts and short sleeves all the time, probably in just boat shoes.
How did your loved ones and friends feel or react when they found out that you had Lyme disease?
I mean, for the longest time, I drove my wife and my daughter crazy. Like I said, I had short-term memory loss. So I would repeatedly ask the same thing over and over again. I mean, my daughter got so, Dad, you just asked me that question for the 5th time 5 minutes ago. Don't you remember anything? Honestly, no. And I didn't realize that I wasn't remembering or that I had asked the same question.
What kind of stage were you at when you were first diagnosed with Lyme disease?
Well, like I say, it's it was, the first case was very advanced. I had it for probably a couple of years without realizing it because it was into my heart, into my brain. So,
After you had Lyme disease once, did you recognize the symptoms and were able to adapt? Like, were you able to identify it quicker?
I never really could pinpoint, obviously, the first time, because I didn't even realize I had it for the longest time. But in reading about it and hearing about, things that you go through looking for the bullseye rash, I said I never, in 3 cases of Lyme, I never had the bullseye rash. But it also the onset can mimic the flu, they say, where without the actual nausea, but the very high fever, the chills, the aches and pains. So I've had the aches and pains, and they've never really gone away. So that's always there. But looking back, I can see 2 other times where I had high fevers and possible, chills, that type of thing, without actually having the flu symptoms of nausea or whatever.
Yeah.
So probably those were the onsets. This last case I just had in December, I kind of self-diagnosed as being Lyme, and I went to the doctor. I didn't have the flu, but I had super high fever, chills, and went to bed for a couple of days. And so I think I have Lyme, and they tested. Lyme doesn't always show up in the blood work, or it doesn't always show up for quite a while. But in this case, it did show up early, and so the last case was diagnosed and treated much earlier than the 2 previous cases that I had.
So you're really an expert by now.
An expert at catching it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting us interview you. We're really happy to have you here.
You're welcome.